Monday, May 15th, and apparently it's a little weird up in here, but we should just accept that. Let's see, this was a point of you checking your B points, because you do have a chance to buy things we'll talk about. Grades have been updated. If you have not done the Twttin quiz, we're going to talk about some of the stuff going into it here in a moment. Your final exam is now up on Skyward, and we're going to go there. So again, make sure that you get a chance to turn in quiz. If you have not turned it in, I will look for it probably today and tomorrow. Then after that, I'll just leave it as a 0 and assume that you're not planning on doing it. Some of you have still not turned in an outsider's test, so sometime wanting to do that may impact your grade in a positive way, along with a quiz.
No, it's me.
Yep. And then those of you who have points, you'll get a chance to buy things this week.
I'm okay.
And we can try to help you out. Alright. So this week, we're going to read chapter 6, or at least part of chapter 6 today, depending on how far we get with you. I will start chapter 7 tomorrow. And so your only homework will be to finish the end of chapter 6 for the 3 of you who are trying to stay on top of things. I tried not to give you as much tonight. And then 7 we'll read tomorrow. And then the last thing, which is Wednesday, is chapters 9. And then finally we'll finish out 10 and 11 on Thursday. And Thursday we'll take the test, and then you'll be done. Friday I begin telling stories. Really?
I won't be on Thursday.
Okay, then you'll miss that test too. Go you. Alright, I'm telling you ahead of time, so now you know. And
Should I take it
then,
on Monday? Wait, can I take it at home or I have
it is a home test.
the one on Thursday?
No, the one on Thursday. Okay. So then I'm going to...
Oh, never mind, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to distract you when you were trying to talk to Jehovah during class. Is that why I cover those things?
No, she was talking to you.
Uh-huh.
No, I thought you put a test on your birthday.
I do. There's a test on my birthday.
Oh, I didn't read the small part. I just read the top. I didn't read the actual, final.
You have me and I don't read. It's okay. So then, back to here to give you guys a quick rewindy thing before I start reading for today. For those of you who may have fallen behind, we can try to help you out a little bit. Chapter 3 was again school dance, where we get a chance to meet Pony Boy and then Angela, which is Brian's ex-girlfriend. Also the sister of Curly, who was the one that was trying to beat up Eminem at the beginning of it. Angela, it turns out, is a little on the crazy side, and she is going to get much worse coming up. But she used to be going out with Brian. So it used to be Angela and Brian were a couple. And then she broke up with Brian because she thought Pony Boy was cute. And so she dipped him and then ended up trying to go out with Pony Boy. Pony Boy, though, took one look at her and said, "You are a slice of crazy," and said no. Angela does not take being told no very well. So when he turns her down, she decides to get revenge. How does she get revenge?
Hitman.
Those what?
Say hitman.
Hitman.
Kinda. A hitman would work for me. And so she hires a hitman to come after Pony Boy, who is supposed to just beat Pony Boy up, but he was scared of Pony Boy. And as we learned from the Outsiders, if you get into a fight and you're scared, what do you bring?
A knife.
Weapon.
And that was where the kid brought a weapon, the weapon being a bottle that he tries to hit Pony Boy with, but Mark steps in and goes, "Hey, don't be fighting with bottles, fight like a man, use your fist." And the guy goes, "What?" Badonk, and hits Mark in the head instead, thus giving Mark a concussion, and then the guy gets arrested, and bad things happen from there. And that was the end of chapter 3. Chapter 4 talked about left and right and Democrats and Republicans and who cares. Then we find out who is it that's been hot wiring cars, and then he had to go on probation. But who is hot wiring cars now? Mark again. And it turns out that he's been still hot wiring cars, and he never stopped. Whose car did he hotwire this time? The principal's cars. The principal ends up yelling at him. But it turns out he kind of had a good reason for stealing the car. Because where was he trying to go? So he got arrested for stealing cars and has to go to probation every week.
Irony.
Problem is, it is irony. They give him no way to get to probation. So he only has one way to get to probation on time,
It's hot wiring.
which was hot wiring a car. So ironically, he is hot wiring cars to try to get to probation to teach him how to not hot wire cars. How much trouble does he get in?
A lot.
A lot.
None at all. And so that was where it turns out that Mark can talk himself out of trouble, and he gets in no trouble whatsoever, and he feels that he does not deserve to get in trouble for anything. And in chapter 5, we have another love triangle, because apparently teenagers like drama. But now it's Kathy and Brian, who were the ones dating. Kathy is the one that is Eminem's sister. And apparently Ponyboy, after not having things go well with Angela, asks out Kathy. But Kathy has a boyfriend, her boyfriend being Brian. So she turns down Ponyboy and says, Brian, you're my man. But Brian is broke and needs money. And how does Brian make money?
By stealing.
Gambling.
And so this is where we find out that what's called pool hustling. So it's not just gambling. Hustling is where you pretend to be bad at something when you gamble on it. And you can hustle anything, whether it be basketball or cards or poker or even pool. There was actually a movie called White Men Can't Jump, came out way back in the 90s. And it was about trying to hustle people and get them to bet on basketball. And there was a white guy people didn't think was very good. They turned out to be really good.
They're making a new one.
And they are making a new one.
With Jack Harlow.
You are correct. And so, same thing from there. There's actually another basketball movie just called Hustle, which is sort of the same idea.
Adam Sandler.
There you go. So here is where it turns out they were hustling, which makes people really angry. Because not only are you gambling, which can make people angry, but it turns out you're lying about your skills at it, which tends to make people really angry. And they ended up winning a whole bunch of money from a guy named Dirty Dave and the Texan. Afterwards, they get introduced to these things called brass knuckles, which is the big heavy things you use to beat somebody up. And the Texans get really upset with Mark and Brian and go, hey, we are going to beat the holy poo out of you because you basically stole money from us. And they're going to throw down, and they get ready to beat them up in the alley. But right before they beat them up, they get saved by Charlie. Comes in and goes, hey, I'm here to save you. And he saves them. But it turns out that they had a gun, they being the Texans, and they pull out their gun and they shoot at him and don't hit Mark or Brian, but kill Charlie. And it turns out Charlie gets killed trying to save them. Charlie was the only one that ran that bar because it was his, so the bar closes down and now they have nowhere else to hang out. Good news is, Brian now gets to inherit something of Charlie's that he was borrowing, which is his car. So Brian technically now has a car because Charlie had it and Charlie's dead. Oh. At the beginning of the story, Brian and Mark had been best friends, but now we've introduced somebody that is causing issues called a girl. And now all of a sudden, Kathy's in there, and Kathy's all lovey-lovey towards Brian, Brian's lovey-lovey towards Kathy. And the best way to break up a friendship is to introduce a girl. Unless you're a girl that is introducing a guy. Hence the bros before girls. Or girls before dudes. Something like that, I think is the same. So now we're going to get a chance to start chapter 6. Agreed. Are you just trying to bruise your arm?
It looks like, after I get done with it, like, I feel like, dang.
So starting on chapter 6, we're going to get into the trial for the Texans here in a moment. Hi, Austin.
Can I get a drink of water?
Sure.
Let's go.
Yes. Good conversation.
I don't even feel it anymore.
Yes, because you've numbed the nerves. That's what they do. The Texans were finally caught and tried. I had to go to the trial to testify, and Mark did too. He watched me closely at first. I guess he couldn't forget that by the time the police had showed up at Charlie's, I'd been hysterical. I mean, he didn't have to worry. I went through the whole trial, calm, collected, numb, empty. I felt like a tape recorder playing back something it had impersonally recorded. The Texans were sentenced to life after a trial that it didn't last as long as I thought it would. I guess because there wasn't any defense. I didn't feel glad or vengeful or anything. I really hadn't much cared whether or not they even caught those guys. Charlie was already dead. I mean, nothing was going to change that. I tried to figure out what made me so shook up about it. I knew people died, although I still can't see me ever doing it. I mean, my father had died, so I knew that people close to you died, the same as strangers did. I guess I just couldn't see standing there, alive, talking, thinking, breathing, being, 1 second, and then dead the next. It really bothered me. Death by violence isn't the same as dying any other way, accident or disease or old age. It just ain't the same. That winter, Mark and me were kind of celebrities because of our involvement in the trial. We were invited to social parties, and we were stared at in the halls, and even the teachers treated us differently. I just put up with it, but Mark, he kind of enjoyed it. He felt bad about Charlie being dead, though, enough so to shut up people who tried to talk to him about it. Mark and me used to go down to the bar and just sit on the curb across the street and stare at the boarded up windows. Just sit and stare and not say anything. It's funny how you don't think about people until after they're dead or gone. Mom had to stay in bed for a month, so we were really getting hard up for money. I got to thinking about what Charlie had said when I asked him for a job. I decided I needed a haircut, some clean clothes, and a really big change in attitude. And I've told you that I don't like authority. It gives people the impression that I'm a smart-aleck kid. I mean, I'll admit, I'm pretty mouthy. I got to thinking, who's going to hire a mouthy kid who acts like he already knows it all? Hey, even if you do know it all, Mark said one evening while we were sitting on the porch, you don't have to let them know it. That's a good idea, I grinned at him. We were getting along better lately. He had given up trying to keep us together the same as we used to be. I know now that must have been a struggle. Branching off from Mark couldn't affect me as much. I was all wrapped up in Kathy. He was on his own. I didn't know how he spent his time when I was with Kathy. I didn't bother to find out. When you go so far as to get a haircut and iron a shirt, I know you're serious. We're really hard up, ain't we, Brian? Yeah. Or hasn't the shortage of food bugged you at all? Man, I don't eat like some people. But I'm going to start bringing in money. You wait and see, buddy. I ain't going to sponge forever. This was the first time in all the years that he had lived with us that Mark ever said anything about being dependent on us. I looked at him quickly. I wanted to say, what do you mean, sponge? We love you. We want you here. Mark, you're my brother. You've got a right to whatever I've got. But I didn't say that. Instead, I said, don't be a ding-a-ling. Now, I wish I'd told him how much he meant to us, to me and Mom, and how he made us seem more like a family. But I never have been able to say things like that, to tell people I loved them, unless it was some nitwit chick I couldn't care less about. So I just gave him a punch on the shoulder. He grinned at me, but absently, like he was thinking of something else. That night, Kathy and I went for a drive. I wanted to tell her about my new approach to getting a job, but before I could, she said suddenly, I think Eminem is smoking marijuana. She sounded worried. I was puzzled. Okay, so what? She gave me an incredulous look. So what? Have you smoked it? Yeah? You haven't? No! That ain't much. I'd rather have a beer any day. I think a lot of these kids just dig it because it's in, it's against the law, and it's supposed to be cool. Me? I don't know. It's okay, but it sure ain't worth 5 years in a state prison. You won't smoke it anymore? It was a request, not an order. So I answered, yeah, I said I wasn't nuts about it. Kathy still seemed concerned. Did you like it? Did it make you want to try stronger stuff? What, like acid? Nah, I can't say that it did, but maybe it affects some people like that. At least that's what I read in the magazines. So this plays a role coming up too when it talks about acid. So this is a much stronger one than like cannabis, weed, or alcohol or something along those lines. And so the way you see it up here is it had a bunch of LSD, or acid. It stands for the lysergic acid. It was a liquid, but it's too powerful to take as a liquid. It would literally like melt your brain. So what they do is they soak pieces of paper in it and then break off a piece of paper and then put that on the tongue, and that's how they would take it. But what it does is it messes with your senses: taste, hearing, sight, feeling and stuff like that. And so it'll make you see things that aren't there, hear things that aren't there. You can even feel things that aren't there. Really can mess with you quite a bit. When you're an adult, it's bad, but not horrible. When you're a kid, it really can disconnect your brain while it's still developing, and it can do like long-term damage where you start like having issues with like knowing what's reality and what's not reality and stuff like that. All right. Kathy sat back with a sigh. Yeah, but it's different with you, Brian. You're smart enough to enjoy yourself without needing artificial stimulants. I didn't say anything to this, as I never turned down compliments, she continued. But Eminem, he's so trusting. If he's running around with people who give him grass, he'll take it. If someone handed him LSD and said, this is groovy, he'd say, okay, and take it. I worry, because before, Eminem always seemed so happy at home. He never seemed to need anything else. But lately, he's gotten so much grief for his hair and some of his ideas. I wish Daddy would leave him alone. Eminem isn't happy at home now, so he goes other places. I don't even know where. I don't even know his friends anymore. You love him a lot, don't you? I said, vaguely jealous, feeling a mild form of whatever it was that Mark felt about Kathy. Sure, don't you? Kathy said, amazed at the possibility that someone might not love simple, brilliant, trusting Eminem. Yeah, I said, because at that moment, I loved anything that Kathy loved because, well, I loved her. I did. I thought it was corny. Love is always corny to anyone not experiencing it himself, and even now, to me, it was corny. But I couldn't help it. I thought about it all the time, that I said I love you to girls I didn't love, to some I didn't even like. It'd been so easy. And now, I couldn't even look at her for fear she could tell somehow. It was really weird. I think you would be a good influence on him, Kathy was saying. And I realized I hadn't heard a thing she'd been saying. I know what. Let's pick up him and Mark and go get a Coke over on the ribbon. Okay. The last thing I wanted just then was to be alone with her. I could easily say something really dumb. When he's worried about saying something dumb to her, it's saying his emotions. It's something like, I love you. And everyone knows that saying I love you to a girl is just really dumb.
What?
We picked up Mark pretty quick. He was walking home from Terry Jones's house. We had to hunt and hunt for Eminem, but we finally found him over in the bowling alley. The ribbon was a 2-mile stretch of hot dog and hamburger stands, drive-ins and supermarkets over on the west side, close to where the Sosa's lived. At night, the parking lots were filled with kids sitting on their cars and waving, watching, and yelling at other kids driving by. You could drive up and down the street looking at people, or park your car and look at people. The cops sometimes came along and told everyone to get back into their cars. But the cops were mostly guys who'd been patrolling the ribbon for a long time. The kids had worn them down by being pleasantly smart-aleck and smilingly uncooperative. So unless the kids were openly smoking grass or fighting, the cops were content to sit on the cars with them and yell rude things to chicks driving by. I love the fact that the cops can just fit in by also being rude to girls. Being rude to girls, it's a fun hobby for everyone. So with what they're talking about here with this whole ribbon thing, it's not really as popular now, but it used to be a big thing even when I was a kid, where you would get a chance, like in a town, they would have a road where kids would just drive back and forth. You would roll down windows and just flirt. There would usually be places along it to park. Here down in Indianapolis, there's the Circle. If you've ever been down there where like the big monument is, back in my day, that's where kids would go to cruise. And we'd go down there like on a Friday night, and you would go down to the Circle and just drive in circles with your windows down and flirt. Sometimes you'd get lucky and girls would flirt back, and then you'd get their numbers, and you'd be like, Riz, and you'd be throwing Riz everywhere. It was great. Nowadays, kids just go online, which is not nearly as much fun. But that's what they're talking about, driving back and forth on this little road.
HTC.
Excuse me.
First of all, Riley.
It was a great place to pick up chicks. If you followed a carload of them around for a while, they might pull over and exchange phone numbers with you. Everyone in town went there to see who was going with who and who had what car. If you found someone you wanted to drive around with, you parked your car, then left it while you goofed around with maybe a dozen different people in one night. Just the driving up and down was a blast. There had been all kinds of editorials in the paper about it because a lot of drug pushers took advantage of the filled parking lots. Quite a bit of grass and money exchanged hands there, but mostly it was harmless. Fights down on the ribbon had really died off in the last year. It had gotten pretty safe, except for drag racing, which caused a wreck or two a week. Boy, you guys know what drag racing is?
Yep.
Racing.
Those of you who watch your Fast and Furious and stuff like that. Boy, I hope I see someone I know, Kathy said. Here I sit, surrounded by beautiful boys. She gave me a teasing grin. Mark raised his eyebrows. Well, if you feel that way about it. He put his arm across her shoulders. We were sitting pretty close together because all four of us were in the front seat. Kathy was next to me, Mark on her other side, and Eminem was hanging out the window, watching people, waving if he was waved to, and yelling back if he was yelled at, always slightly surprised at the crudity of the calls, as if he hadn't heard the same things 100,000 times before.
Can I turn my phone on Do Not Disturb?
Yeah, that's fine. So, in the car where they are sitting, all four of them are in the front seat because there's this thing called a bench seat. So you have Brian, who is driving. Right next to him is going to be his girlfriend. Next to girlfriend is Mark. And then hanging out the window over here is Eminem. So you have all four of them sitting in this front seat all crowded together. Because in a moment, something's getting ready to happen. I haven't gotten there yet. I put one arm across Kathy's shoulders, too. She beamed. It's so nice to feel wanted. A couple of blondes and... That's an orange Camaro, in case you don't know. A couple of blondes in an orange Camaro came by on Eminem's side of the car and then made him an indecent proposition, meaning they used curse words in a scary way. I thought the kid was going to fall out of the window. He was so shocked. The rest of us just laughed. The ribbon was a 2-lane street with an open lane at the traffic lights for left turns. When we stopped at the light, we were in the middle lane with cars on both sides of us. The blonde chicks in the orange Camaro were on our right, and they were still talking to Eminem. I didn't catch much of the conversation, but Mark did, and he was talking to them too, trying to see around Eminem, who took up a lot of the window. On our left was a green, out-of-sight Corvette with a couple of guys in it, waiting for a left turn signal. They looked like real snobs. You can tell just by looking that some guys are snobs, especially ones with Corvettes. The one on the passenger side glanced over at us and, I still don't understand why, popped off with a really obscene remark. I mean, I sat stunned for a minute. The thought of Kathy's hearing such a thing just froze me. Then, so quick I didn't even realize what was happening, Mark reached past Eminem, opened the car door, pushed Eminem out of the way, ran around to my side of the car, and then punched the foul-mouthed guy in the nose, literally smashing his nose in. It was their turn to be stunned. Before they could move, Mark was back in the car. He jumped into the back seat, yelled, "Take off!" The light had turned green, so I stepped hard on the accelerator. The Corvette was supposed to turn left, and all the cars behind it were honking, so they turned left. I thought maybe they'd come after us. They were older guys, maybe 18 years old, but they didn't. We drove up and down the ribbon without ever seeing them again. "Well, you're a fast worker," Kathy said. I wondered if she was mad at me because I hadn't been the one to punch that guy. She was my girlfriend. I should have been the one to punch him. I was halfway hacked off at Mark for showing me up. "Well," Mark said in a mock-serious voice, hanging over the front seat, "I get these impulses." "Impulses? To jump out of cars and hit people?" Kathy said dryly. And I realized that she didn't think Mark was a hero for what he'd done. As a matter of fact, she didn't think much of it at all. "They hit us first," Mark said, sitting back in the seat. "A hit doesn't have to be physical. I couldn't hit them the way they hit us without hitting you too." I'd always known that, in spite of his lousy grades, Mark was as smart as I was. But it was still surprising whenever he proved it to me. Kathy was quiet. Then she turned around and looked at Mark for a long time. I never know what to make of you, Mark. Why make anything of anybody? Why not just take people or leave them? Mark was in a funny mood, I could tell. I'd seen him in that mood before. He was never that way with me, but I'd seen him suddenly turn on people, like a teased lion who's had enough. I remember the night Charlie was killed. Mark grabbing up the shotgun and firing anyway. I don't think I could have done that, even if I had known Charlie was dead at the time. I don't like being analyzed, baby, Mark said, so don't do it. I couldn't tell him to lay off because he had a point. Kathy did like to turn everyone inside and out and look at him. Sorry.
Bless you.
There's a cough, thanks. It didn't bother me, but I could see where it might bug some people. I'm sorry, Kathy said, even though she wasn't. I had to say something, so I said, well, let's get a hamburger. We turned into a big drive-in called Jay's, which was always crowded. It was the drive-in, so not drive-in movie theater, but drive-in restaurant like this. That's what they're pulling into.
Oh my god.
Can you go back to the last sentence real quick? It looks like the back review.
It does.
I'm sure they probably had someone who based one off the others pretty close to it. It was a setup with a stall for each car and a little deal that had a menu and a button on it. You pushed the button and a voice came out the dealie and said, "Order please." And then you told the speaker what you wanted. In this case, it was 3 hamburgers, 1 steak sandwich, a cherry pineapple 7-Up, and 3 Cokes. And about 10 minutes later, a chick appeared with the food. It was actually kind of spooky. The place was crawling with kids. It was mainly a soc hangout. There used to be a drive-in over on our side of town where the hoods went, but the dingo was bombed and it burned down, so we started coming over here. Kids were driving through the parking area, looking at the kids who were sitting in their cars. It was the same thing that was going on in the street, only on a smaller scale. They had a cop stationed at the drive-in to prevent trouble. He was on a first-name basis with a lot of the kids there. He was a friendly, good-natured cop who didn't mind getting splattered by a water pistol now and then. I didn't much care for him, though, due to my feelings about cops in general. I began telling Kathy about the time the cops had beaten me up when I was 13. "You shouldn't have been running around drunk in the middle of the night," she said. I never thought of it that way. And that's where I stop with you. Tomorrow I'll start chapter 7 with you. We only have like 2 more days of me reading.
Hi, YouTube.
Robert.
Riley, you are so loud.
Did you hear
You
Riley?